Well, hello there, everybody, and welcome to Atthis-Age. I am Lisa Edmonds.
And I am Hope LaMonica.
And we are so glad that you chose to join us on the podcast today. Today we have a very interesting topic. Fortunately or unfortunately, it's something that both Hope and I have gone through, and we want to talk about it. So, and I forgot to allow you to introduce yourself. Did you say Hope LaMonica?
I did say that.
Ooh, we'll have to talk about
That's
memory.
on aging.
That's age. We might have to talk about that a little later too, because there are times that I go back out through the door to try to get the thought I dropped. So we want to talk about divorce, and it is not an easy thing. And Hope and I want to say right from the very beginning, we are not advocates for divorce. We are not here to celebrate it. We're here not to promote it, and we're not here to encourage you to do it. Divorce is very difficult. It's difficult on your soul. It's difficult on your family. It's difficult on your wallet, and it's very difficult for your faith to be able to be into that. It's where we ended up, and we just want to talk about it. But by no means are either one of us professionals. So what you're getting from us is our opinion and our experience. And we just want to share that, and we want to talk about it. We really do hope that you are never in this situation. If you have been in this situation, maybe you're going to find some relief in knowing that maybe some part of your experience, you weren't alone. But we definitely encourage you, if you are a married couple, you're a married woman, and you're considering this, we want you to seek counseling, to seek pastoral care, to seek marriage counseling, whatever you need to do to hopefully protect and save your marriage. The grass is not always greener on the other side. And so do your absolute most to make your marriage better and to save it. Where I think we both would say, in cases of abuse, that's not okay.
Right.
Mentally abusing you, emotionally abusing you, or physically abusing you, not okay. That is not something you accept. That is not something you work out. That is something you leave. Okay? So we just want to put that out there and let you know ahead of time. That's how we feel.
Right.
And that's what we're thinking. So I am still in my legal battle. I've been separated for almost 3 years. I waited a year in that hopes to make it better, in that hopes that things would turn around. And unfortunately, it didn't. So I've been in a 2-year legal struggle. What about you, Hope?
I've been divorced. I was married for 25 years, so that's a whole nother story. And I've been in August, this coming August, it will be divorced 7 years.
So I'm going to ask you questions almost like an interview, and I'll kind of answer my questions too. So you had been married for 25 years.
Yes.
So was I. I was married for 23 when I separated, 25 when I filed. So my question to you was, after 25 years, what drew you to make that step? We're going to try to have the utmost respect for our ex and former spouses.
Their families.
Yeah, and their family, because we have children by them, right? And what's in them, part of them is in our kids. And so we're going to do our absolute best to show absolute respect. I have a good relationship with my ex-husband. He loves our children. And so we're going to try to honor that. And I know Hope will do the exact same. So, but at that point, at that mark, do you know that divorce is called a gray divorce?
Really?
Yeah, I don't know why I was looking up statistics, but they said that, do you know that right now, I'm trying to get it right, that gray divorces are now responsible for about 35% of divorces that are happening. People who are in their 50s, average woman is 50 to 55 years old, that is experiencing a gray divorce. So it's after 25 years and you're in your 50s when it happens. So what drew you to that conclusion? Because you put 25 years in. That's no small thing. You don't walk away from 25 years easy.
So in my case, and I'm open about my story, and I've shared it on social media. My case where it was emotional, mental, and verbal abuse. And it got to the point where it was not healthy for my children to continue to see that. I didn't want them to think that that was okay, because the longer that I stayed and they saw that, they would think that that was normal behavior.
Yeah, that was a big motivator for me too, was my girls.
So that was my motivation to get out of that. And I think when I finally told them that I was getting divorced, it was almost like, what took you so long? And I'm thinking, I'm doing the best for my daughters and staying in a marriage so that they would have two parents in the home.
Yeah, it's a big deal, especially for us as believers, right? We want to provide that nucleus of a family. We want to be examples of faith, right? We want all those things. But I can honestly tell you, the only two people that know the truth of any marriage are those two people.
Yes.
And I have to say, and this was a hard truth for me, when I made my decision, I actually had to sit down and I said this. I don't think that what's going on is pleasing God, because I had gotten to such a depressed state.
Right.
And so I felt like I had three choices. I could have an affair and meet the emotional needs and the partnership needs and things like that I had been lacking for quite some time. I could commit suicide and be faithful to the covenant that I made, death till us part, right? But I wasn't living, and I was in such a depressed state and was not being heard. And the needs that I expressed were dismissed for years, to the point to where my body, mind, body are connected. So I had a cardiologist sit me down, because he's like, you're 70 years old inside.
Wow.
What is happening? He's like, Lisa, you have got to figure out what is going on, because your body is communicating to you that things aren't right. He's like, you're gonna die an early death. He literally told me, you are gonna die an early death, but I can't find anything wrong with you. You're growing all these masses and your heart's messing up. You gotta figure out what the source of this is. And so I sat back and I thought, I'm gonna leave my children. Like, I think I'm doing the best for them, but this anxiety, this stress, this pain, this is going to cause me an early death, and then I'm going to leave my kids. And so in all honesty, and I know it may not make sense to a lot of people, I figured if I was going to have to hurt God's heart, I would try to pick the lesser of three evils. Right? Having an affair isn't right. I don't believe in it. I was faithful into my marriage. Suicide, I leave my children. What does that say for God?
Right.
And his point in my life if I end my own life? And so I thought, I've got to leave this situation.
Right.
I've got to leave it.
And even, I know for me that was such a struggle, because being a believer, you know, the Bible says God hates divorce.
Hates divorce.
And I was like, what does that mean? And so for me, I had to go to my pastor and talk to him. And he says, Hope, he goes, and you know, and there may be some biblical scholars that disagree. He says, your husband broke the covenant. He says, he is supposed to love you the way that Christ loves the church. And
that was a big thing. That was the big statement. I stayed accountable to, I have an accountability group of women that I talked to before this process. The staff and elders at my church. I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want, because I was in leadership, I didn't want to surprise them. I didn't want to be doing anything out of order. And even in this whole process, there was all these steps that I took to try to lead back into the marriage or try to make things okay, because you honestly do want to honor God. But in the end, you cannot have a good marriage by yourself.
And if you're going to counseling and doing the work, and the other party
actually doing the work,
is not willing to go, and that was what my pastor said to me. He's like, you're showing up every week by yourself. So you're telling me that you're wanting to put the work in, but he's no longer wanting to. So.
All I can say is same.
So it's
a lot of words were said, but we're not followed through.
Absolutely.
You know, oh, I want this, I want that, but you don't get it. And then you get to a point. And you know, because I went to counseling for a couple of years before I even made the decision, because I wanted to make sure my heart and my mind were right. You know, I spent a lot of years, unfortunately, when you spend a lot of years hearing, no, you're wrong, no, that's crazy, or no, that's not true.
Crazy thinking.
Yeah, you don't know. You don't know what's right. And so I sought Christian counseling to get my head straight and to see where my grounds were. And I wasn't very good at setting boundaries. And so, you know, I had, and this was from my counselor, and I loved it. And she said, Lisa, boundaries are given by the Lord, and it helps you be a better Christian, because you're not having to ask forgiveness, and you're not hating people, or you're not doing all this because lines have been drawn. And there's a wonderful book, the Boundaries books, called Boundaries in Marriage.
Yes.
Right? My pastor gave me the Boundaries book, and I looked on that, and I'm like, my boundaries are being kicked over, hand over fist. You know what I mean? And it's making me hateful, and it's making me resentful, and it's making me hurt, and it's making me all these things. And so, you know, I had to put those boundaries up, and I had to say, this is the requirements of making this marriage work, or putting this marriage back together. And it made sense. I've said to other people, when you really want something, you work toward it. You put the energy in, you make the changes, you make the sacrifice. And so that's one of the reasons why I think Hope and I mentioned in the very beginning, marriage is real work, and you have to have two people who are willing to do it. Both feet in, fully committed, ready to make those changes. And you can't do it by yourself. And so her and I both made the decision that we could not stay in a situation that wasn't honoring God or teaching our girls, both of us have daughters, what a good, beautiful, solid, healthy relationship looked like. Because, you know, I had to ask myself the question, would I want my daughters in the situation that I'm in?
Absolutely.
No. But that's what I was showing them. And I hoped through that process that the light bulb would come on, and, you know, there'd be rainbows and sunshine and things like that, but it didn't happen. And so if you can remember what that process for you, did you move out? Did you take the girls? Did he move out? How were you financially in those first seasons?
Oh gosh. So, I filed for divorce in December, January timeframe. We didn't go to court until April, and the judge said that we had to stay together in the same house until May. So
really, what was that like?
It was.
Was it a financial reason why he said that had to be done, or?
I have no idea.
Wow.
Yeah. So
okay.
That was difficult in itself. Living in the same house, living in separate bedrooms, and trying to be cordial and communicate with one another. Our divorce was final on August the 13th. It was Friday the 13th. I'll never forget that. $25,000 later. So divorce is not cheap.
It's not cheap.
At all.
At all.
At all.
So it was less than a year.
Less than a year.
Okay, that's pretty good. I'm on year 2. Don't know why.
Don't know why.
Yeah. But yeah. My lawyer needs to pay for his Porsche.
Yeah,
so that's what I'm thinking. So you guys lived in the same house. You had to learn to kind of be amicable. And listen, there are things, right? I mean, one of the things, I don't know if Hope had to go through it, but when I filed I had to go through classes through the court
Yes.
on how to act right during divorce.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they make you go through this online course and certify that basically that you'll be a decent human being, and you'll be cordial, and that you will, above all things, consider your children.
Parenting class.
Take a parenting class on how to parent through divorce, because it is traumatic. Now, my oldest daughter was in college at the time, and when I separated, and she's like, okay, saw that coming. But my youngest was only 11, and I took her with me. I'm going to be, and Hope can speak to how her daughters, kind of felt about it. Listen, even the most dysfunctional thing can happen. Kids want a unified family. Right? So even though it was broken and they see, it's painful.
Yes.
It's painful. I called, my daughter up on the phone, and she was like, I totally get it, but it breaks my heart. And I don't think there was anything more painful than looking at my 11-year-old and saying, pack your stuff.
Fortunately, I don't know which would have been better, if we stayed in the same house or if I moved out, because there were moments where she saw some of the fighting and the yelling and him not speaking to her because he was mad at me. So that wasn't healthy for her to go through. And she's still dealing with some of that today.
Yeah. I walk a very, very fine line with my ex-husband because of my kids. I probably still do more to make their relationship happen,
Right.
because I know we're in a couple different households, and I want my kids to have a relationship with their dad.
Absolutely.
And if he's not being right or doing right, I want that to be their discovery, not my words.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And I think it's important, no matter that we can work it out and our marriage isn't healthy, I still want them to have a healthy relationship with both of us.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I want that too. Like it could turn, but right now, me and my who is still currently my husband, our dialogues are pretty easy. When we're exchanging our kids or something like that, I just choose not to let it get ugly.
Right.
And definitely not in front of my kids or if they're in earshot of the conversation. It is very, very important that you protect them and you protect their hearts and their thinking. Divorce in itself is hard. It is very, very hard. And so if it could be the one thing you can focus on protecting your kids in a decent way, being a decent, honorable person, and not putting them in the middle. Unfortunately, when I was younger, my parents did a divorce. I was very much in the middle, and it was horrendous. That's the only way I can describe it, is
parents
horrendous.
use that the children aren't pawns. They're not tools for to be played with. Their emotions.
Yeah.
So that is the worst
It's
thing.
the worst. And you know what? My daughter isn't hooked to money. You're paying or you're not paying. You still have a relationship with your child.
Absolutely.
We'll deal with that other stuff later. But she's still yours. And she still needs, all kids need their dad. I will say that my entire life. I will never ever say that that's not true. If you are a single dad and you're divorced and you have children, listen, do not abandon your kids. They need you. It doesn't matter if your ex-wife is dating, if she's remarried, if she's in another state. Fathers are important. They need you. And so if you hate us, that's okay. You can do that. But don't make them pay for it.
Right.
Relationships come and relationships go. But that blood thing is right there with your children. So we strongly encourage, even if you're, this is a woman's forum, but if you're the woman and you don't have the children, get with your kids. Call them, write them, text them, make it a point to get with your kids, because mothers are also important to the lives of their children. You can do this right.
Yes.
Right? You can do this right. I've actually known other people that I'm kind of surprised. Like, I sang for a wedding. It was about this time last year, and I was like, is her ex-husband giving her away? And he really did.
Wow.
I could not believe it. They were they learned to determine that they were better apart, but they were good parents and they loved their kids. And it took a couple years for them to kind of get over it. Mm-hmm. But when they did, they end up finding this friendship. Mm-hmm. And he, I remember I was talking to Jake and he's like, that's the mother of my kids. I'm going to honor her as the mother of my kids. She's always going to be the mother of my children. But they were childhood sweethearts and best friends. And he said, even though he was upset that he had lost his wife, he was more upset that he lost this 20-year friendship. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know how they did it. Wow. But they did it. And he was friends with her husband, and her father had passed, and the closest person to her was her ex-husband. And he walked her down the aisle to her new husband. Wow, and that was probably the most mature thing that I'd ever seen. I'm not holding my breath right? for anything like that to happen. But it was a sign of maturity that I was amazed at, and that I was really impressed by. So you even talked about how expensive divorce is.
Yes.
Right.
Very expensive.
And was it 25 you said?
25,000. And it's not only the expense of the divorce, but it's starting over. So in our case, we had to sell our house and split the proceeds of that. Mm-hmm. So that meant that I had to move into an apartment until I found a house to buy. Mm-hmm. And could I ever afford a house by myself as a single mom raising one daughter that was still at home?
I'm like mirroring your life here.
Right, right. So you're looking at that, and now you've got a car payment, you've got utilities. It is much cheaper to be a dual couple than to be independent. Yeah. So I've learned that through the years. Yeah.
So me and Hope might be the poster children for you to stay in your marriage, because it is hard. Mm-hmm. It's hard day in and day out. And I can say I'm just kind of approaching it because, you do spend 25 years married. I could not see another person in my life. I had mapped it all out in my brain that, we'd be in rocking chairs, playing with our grandkids.
Kids together. Right.
And so there's a whole nother emotional aspect to leaving a marriage that's that long standing.
Right. And you feel that guilt that I'm a failure now.
Oh man, that's deep right there.
And when you're filling out any type of applications or forms now, it says, are you single, married, separated, or divorced? And I was like, why does it even matter? I'm single. Mm-hmm. But divorced, every time I check that box, it just
stings a little bit.
It stings a little bit. And it's like, oh, you didn't make it. So, yeah.
I want credit. I want credit for 25 years. I want credit. You know what I mean? Because that ends up a label. We don't get to say, I was married for 25 years, and we don't get that credit. It's just,
you're divorced. Or, I don't know if you get this, it's like, oh, you were married 25 years. Why did you should have just stayed. So then you have that aspect of it.
You do. You really do. They're like, you'd been through it now. There's that old saying, I had a lady say, well, the devil you know is a lot easier than the devil you don't.
No. Yeah.
Right?
I can agree with her.
And listen, we're going to talk about dating, and we're going to talk about devil you know, devil you don't, because it is a completely different dynamic. And honestly, starting over at this age is scary. Mm-hmm. It's really, really scary. I still have a child at home, and I never ever thought I would say the word single mom.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I never thought I'd say it. I never thought I'd be it. I always had empathy and sympathy and cared for others, cared for single moms, never knowing that I would be in that boat.
And it's hard. Yeah.
When the school calls, or when you can't make the basketball game, who's going to make the basketball game?
When they're sick.
And you have to
take off, use your vacation days to stay home with them.
Or you turn around and their needs are more than your money,
Mm-hmm.
there's nobody else to go to.
Right. Absolutely.
There's nobody else to go to. Saying to your kids, I don't know how often I said it when I was married, but how often I say it now. We can't afford that.
Mm-hmm.
There's food at home.
Right?
Can we stop at Chick-fil-A? There's food at home. Yeah. That kind of thing. To reasonably look at them and them to see the whole pinching pennies process that they really weren't accustomed to seeing. And here I'm going to touch on a little bit something too. You get used to somebody lying in bed next to you. Mm. You sleep differently. Mm-hmm. You sleep differently. Even if I didn't like that joker, you sleep differently with that person of so many years. Mm-hmm. And I remember the first day I slept by myself.
I remember crying.
Yeah.
Because I rolled over.
Yeah.
And he wasn't in the house. I mean, even though we were sleeping in separate rooms, it was having him in the house.
Mm-hmm. Their presence.
The presence.
Their presence. Yes. You turn around and you get used to the quiet. Mm-hmm. Like my daughter, she spends time with her dad. My other daughter just came home, but for the last 2 years, she walks out the door and the quiet. Mm-hmm. Making meals for one.
I don't know how. I still make meals for 4.
Right, honestly. Yeah. You guys think that's like a big deal? It's a big deal. Like you turn around in the day, you only need 1 chicken breast.
Mm-hmm. Which is single all over when you're in the store.
Yeah, single all over. The day I took off my wedding ring.
Oh. Yeah. I still have mine in my jewelry box.
Yeah, the day I took my ring off. Mm-hmm. And walked around without it. Mm-hmm. Like, just naked. Just naked. It just felt so separate. But here's for me, and I hope you had to have come to this conclusion too, there was no going back to the way it was.
Right.
I was ready. I fully believe that you were ready to fix what was broken and not suffer all those things. Mm-hmm. But you can't do it by yourself. You can't do it by yourself.
Right. And I think I've learned, after going through the divorce and spending the $25,000 on the divorce, I had a lot of anger. A lot of anger. If I can be transparent, I had hate. If there were days that I would think, if I saw him walking down the street, I could hit him with my car. And so I went through that because it's like I lost everything that I worked so hard for. And I finally had to come to a point where it's like, I can't live like this. I was in this 25-year marriage feeling all of these things, and now I've left the marriage and I'm supposed to be happier, but I wasn't happy. I was angry. And I finally called him up and I said, can we have coffee? And he's like, yes. And I said, I just want to tell you, I forgive you for everything that you did to me. And I ask you to forgive me for anything I did to you.
That's big.
And it was, Lisa, it was like this immediate weight was just lifted off me. And it's been easier. It's been easier. We're cordial to each other now. And we're at we don't talk and we don't have to have conversations because our children are adults. But, I can be in the same room. We can go to family events together and it's not this tension.
Yeah. You definitely can't live with the anger.
Right.
You can't go forward with the anger. There's nothing healthy about holding all that in and holding all that against him. You're not going to get anywhere, but sick probably.
Sick, yes.
Angry.
Yes.
You're man hater.
Ulcers. I got ulcers. I had ulcers.
Yeah, that's your
So,
body telling you
depending
what's going on emotionally that's
right.
tearing you up.
Right.
So definitely, forgiveness is a real big part of it to be able to move forward. I know I was disappointed. I felt as though I should have been worth some effort. And after 25 years of cleaning your house and cooking your meals and having your babies and everything else that went along with it, I should have been worth some effort. And the realization that I just wasn't valued that much was devastating. It was devastating because I allowed myself to be devalued. Does that make any sense, Hope?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? My effort was never reciprocated, and I knew that. I just thought, if I'm humble enough, if I'm submissive enough, if I do all these things, so I just kept lowering my standards, lowering and lowering and lowering and lowering, till there was no standard.
You became what you felt he wanted.
And it still didn't make things well.
Right.
And I describe it as, if you have this full glass of water and you're down to the last 10%, and when that's gone, you die. Right. I was down at 10%, and I was like, I have to save myself. I'm just at this point, I have to save myself. I'm emotionally exhausted.
Right.
And in order to save myself and to revalue who I was, I have to get out of this. And I encourage anybody who is married and finding themselves in a position to where boundaries have been violated and value is not there and no one's putting in an effort, to not ignore those red flags.
Right.
Do not ignore the red flags in your relationship. Get yourself to a counselor, to a pastor, I staged an intervention at one point.
Right.
3 years before I left, I staged an intervention. I called 3 of our longtime couple friends, and in front of them, I said, I'm dying. This marriage is miserable. This is what's happening with our finances, and and I laid it out. They're there, mouths open. And I said, I'm going to leave if things don't change. I reached out. I encourage you to reach out. Let somebody know. The false perception of perfection is not worth it.
Wow. I like that.
That right? The false perception of perfection isn't worth it. And this is a weird thing to say. Everybody was surprised when Robin Williams committed suicide. The man was dying inside and faking it to the public. What if he had said something to people around him? Right. He could be alive today.
Right.
Your marriage actually might get better if you expose the fakeness.
Yeah.
Right? To that pastor, to that counselor, to whoever you need to go to those trusted friends. You may have an opportunity for things to get better, because concealing the dysfunction does not make the dysfunction better.
No, yeah. And to all of our friends, everything from the outside looked wonderful. It's like, oh, this is a happy family, but on the inside, it was a fake smile. I was pretending. I was walking around like everything was great, and I was dying inside. A little bit died every day.
Me too. To the point to where I became like, you give so much that my mom said this one day to me. She said, Lisa, when a woman is done, she's done. I know when you made that choice and when I made that choice, we didn't make that choice lightly. It wasn't a veiled threat. Like, I'm just going to be back next week. I'm just saying this. Nobody does that. Nobody puts their children through it. Nobody puts their finances to it. Nobody lays down that check to a lawyer as a threat.
No.
Right?
No.
So and this is my admission, I let my frustration, I let being devalued, I let the brokenness continue, thinking that I personally somehow through my actions could fix it, or through my humility, or through that submissiveness, or whatever, and it just got worse. And so that whole time I was getting to done. Maybe it's just a maybe, I don't know, if I had done it at year 5,
right,
it would have been better. I don't know. So my only encouragement to you is, if it's broken, don't wait 25 years to try to fix it.
Right.
I much rather would have spent $5,000, you $25,000, in being whole. But again, it takes 2 people, right? But maybe if those boundaries, if those things would have been put into place, we don't know what the outcome is. This is where we're at now.
Yeah.
So maybe we're your cautionary tales.
Or if you're thinking about getting married, premarital counseling.
Premarital counseling. That's a real thing. And to walk it completely through.
Yes.
I'm going to do a quick plug for marriage. There are marriage ministries and stuff inside of churches. Our church is doing one called Re-Engage. And it's got right now 35 couples involved. Anyone who are engaged to being married for 40 years are involved with this, and they are picking through your personality, your background, and your faith, and how you relate to each other. So premarital, honestly, there's some good tests out there. I look at the one we did, because we did do it, but we went into it late. Right. So we only had a few weeks, and so we were like, okay, yeah, that's good. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Okay, woo, we're gonna go off and get married, without really digging fully into that format. And because I thought it was cute and lovely, I saved it. I went through that format. That test told me exactly everything that I would have been going through.
Wow.
In his personality and his thoughts. He knows this, so I don't think this is a bad thing. In our test, it said I had an 80% correct outlook on what marriage is, and he had a 10.
Oh.
10%
Wow.
reality on what marriage was like.
Wow.
And I lived in that 10% for 25 years. Wow. And if we would have really taken that seriously and taken the time and picked through that, we may have been healthier.
Yes.
And so we strongly encourage, don't poo-poo that. Don't ignore that. All the emotions and all the hormones and all the love, that's great. But Hope and I both know after 25 years, that wanes. That goes back and forth. There was a point where I was like, I would tell my ex-husband, your breathing is bothering me.
So the things that you thought were cute
The
when you
things
were
you thought
dating
were cute, ooh,
will work your last nerve.
You want to chop him in the throat in his sleep. Right? And then there's other things, though, that you learn and you grow in, but it's really, really good, outside of all those emotions and flying hormones, to find the details out of a person. Because when all is said and done, it's your everyday. There's some Black Eyed Peas song that said, the day by day, like, what was the song? He goes, forever, forever, ever, forever, ever. He goes, what is it? It's not that song. That's not a good one. But anyway, somewhere in there, he talks about, I'm sorry, Miss Jackson. Do you remember?
Oh, yes.
I'm sorry, Miss Jackson. Ooh, I am for real. But I ain't going to keep that up. You guys just know. But he says, never meant to make your daughter cry. I apologize a million times. And in there he says, he's saying we're supposed to be forever, forever, ever, forever, ever.
Right.
But he makes one statement and he says, the day-by-day ruler can't be too long. Because it's the everyday stuff that you deal with. Romance hits here and there, vacations hit there and there.
Right.
What's going to hit you more is that day-by-day ruler. The diapers you change every day, the money you got to give out, the money you got to take in. You know what I mean? Dealing with all that stuff. That's the day-by-day stuff. And that's the stuff you need to learn what the other person's going to think about, how they're going to handle it.
Right.
So going forward, because Hope and I, we're moving forward.
Yes.
And we've learned some things through this past relationship, getting in it, getting out of it. And we're just, again, we strongly encourage you to seek that help, invest that money into making your marriage better. We're not an advocate for abuse.
Right.
Abusive relationships, we don't stand for that. Christ does not stand for that. So you get out of those and hopefully they'll seek help. And you don't go back into those things unless they have proven they are better and smarter and more controlled people.
Yes.
You stay out of that if you're in an abusive situation. And I'll try to, as I post this, maybe to put information in here for women who are dealing with domestic violence or abuse, because we want you to be safe. And your safety is most important. God loves you more than anything. You are not a punching bag, and you're not something to be abused or discarded or mistreated. You're his daughter, and you were his daughter or his son first before you were somebody's spouse. And you need to be taken care of and taken care of well. Well, Hope and I are going to let you go. We're so grateful that you decided to join Atthis-Age. Please like, comment, share, go subscribe to our YouTube page. We're excited because we're going to be talking to you next about moving forward and dating at this age. Catch you later.